But one specific question that I also have, and I'm sure a lot of you have, and sort of spoke about it earlier, was the biggest ethical challenges that's facing the media industry as a result of AI. We'll start there. We'll start off with Zoe. I know you were at the World Press Freedom week this week in Brussels with UNESCO, where they, I'm sure, in depth discussed what AI means to press freedom and just in the media as a whole. So if you can just summarize us the biggest threats, ethical threats that we see, or challenges that we see in the industry that was brought forth by AI.
I think that those threats are universal, and it relates largely to the economic viability of the media and how AI is impacting that. Then obviously the issue of information integrity, the need for regulation, but regulation that is founded on a human, from a human rights perspective, regulation that is sound, that is reflective of the context also in which it must operate. Also, the fact that AI is affecting populations and contexts differently, and that any kind of response to AI is done from that perspective. I think we've been having the discussion around AI for a very long time. I mean, AI has been around for a long time, 70 plus years. People have been talking about this. But I mean, the conversation for us really only started, say, come 2022. I think it's like around November 2022, when all of a sudden everybody was talking about AI. And so the issue really is generative AI. That is our biggest concern. And generative AI, what that means for the newsrooms, what that means for the media industry, but also more broadly, I think the discussion, a lot of the focus was on big tech, and the fact that AI depends on data. It's the biggest consumer of data, the biggest user of data, and it throws out that same data to you. But so who is in control of the data? How is that data used? And the issue of data sovereignty came up quite a bit. I don't know how many of you have been following the news. Just a couple of days ago, the Nigerian government fined Meta somewhere around 300 million. And I was rather taken aback by the way, so maybe I'm going off, but I think this is a very important issue to mention. The BBC framed that article in a very strange way, talking about how many Nigerians would be impacted by the action of the Nigerian government. If Mark Zuckerberg hit back and say that he'll just shut down Meta in Nigeria, and the BBC was concerned about how it would affect the economy and how many businesses would be affected, and how Nigerians in general, a population of over 300 million people, would be affected by it. But the fact of the matter is, this is an issue of data sovereignty. And AI and the big platforms are depending on the absolute, scraping and complete disregard for African governments and our capacity to regulate our data. And this is what we are asking then from, and this was rather the discussion from media houses, from journalists, be very particular about how you use AI, the kind of information that you put out, because you are handing over data. We in Namibia cannot be speaking, I think, at this point in time about large language models and training those large language models, because we just don't have, terabytes and terabytes of data. But if we train our own AI that reflect our context and the diversity of the Namibian population, that is how we can effectively use AI. And the focus really is on using AI as a tool for development, for the benefit of Namibians and for journalists specifically, to continue to practice journalism that is in the public interest.
Yeah. And it speaks to what Peter was speaking about, the fact that a lot of journalists do not pay for these models or for these platforms. They use it free, and that leaves your data sort of looming in the air as well. I think the idea of understanding your data and your data being online is another discussion that needs to be spoken about. Data privacy, data rights. Where do we stand as Namibia?
And that is why I hope that journalists will become part of the discussion and possibly, hopefully, report a lot more on ICTs, on the ICT policies that are being designed, because whilst we have an access to information law, which is not operationalized yet, we don't have a data protection law, and these two things go hand in hand.
Yeah. John, I think one of the biggest questions that also came up during the training was our code of ethics as journalists, our self-regulation, and how this can be influenced, and where does the code of ethics cover our ethical use of AI? Are we going to see any amendments to the code of ethics that will include that?
Right. In preparing for this panel discussion, I said to myself, obviously I'm not an expert when it comes to AI. So, and being an academic, we're in a business of lifelong learning. So I had to literally read very broad about the topic. And I've used 4 main sources, very recent sources. And I want to mention them because I think I found it very helpful, and it may also just be helpful for those ones that are listening as journalists. Before I answer your question, and that is, I came across what is called the Haarlem Declaration, championing AI for advancing inclusive, safe, and reliable digital media spaces, published in 2024. Haarlem is a town in the Netherlands. And then another source, which I really found very useful, was Generating Change, a global survey of what news organizations are doing with AI, co-authored, and with AI. And of course, that was co-authored by Charlie Becker and Maria Yasrin of 2023. Another one, very useful, AI-generated disinformation in Europe and Africa, cases, solutions, and transnational learning, and it was commissioned by the Konrad Adenauer Foundation. And the very last one, produced by the South African Press Council, is a guidance note on artificial intelligence. And that answers exactly your question. One, in 6 broad themes, and coincidentally, these 6 themes are speaking exactly to the kind of things that Peter was mentioning. And so what I've done, I then said, let me see what our code is saying on these very 6 themes. The first one is on transparency and accountability in AI-driven journalism. The ethical concern in that regard is lack of transparency in how AI tools are used to produce or curate content that can mislead audience and erode trust in journalism. I think it was mentioned. What is our code saying on that? Our code does not explicitly address AI or automated content generation, clauses on accuracy and honesty may apply but remain insufficient. Another one is on the issue of bias and discrimination embedded in AI. Again, what Peter mentioned. Obviously, an ethical concern is that AI system can reproduce and amplify existing biases, as we were told. Again, the Namibian Code mandates non-discrimination. And of course, here I talk about the Code of Ethics and Conduct for Namibian Media. It mandates non-discrimination, but lack guidance on algorithm bias, as was mentioned. The third one, AI and disinformation. The rise of deepfakes and synthetic content. An ethical concern is that AI-generated misinformation pose risk to democracy, especially during elections. Our code, in this context, lack guidance for synthetic media or verification processes. About 3 weeks ago, I received as media ombudsman a complaint from Professor Job Amupanda about the cartoon that has been produced of him by is it Dudley? Job called me and we spoke for almost 45 minutes. Job trying to convince me that he swear before God and on his life that the image used by him or used by the Namibian is fake. It's not a true reflection. And this make me think, is it not the kind of deep fakes that we are concerned about? Because Job is saying, you can go to Hansard, you can check the footage. I never slept for the past month that we are in office, or at least in whatever. I did not do this. And he claims, of course, he never submitted an official complaint, but he claims that that is not a true reflection of him being found sleeping on the job, as the cartoon is saying. Excuse me, that's AI rubbish. And then Peter also mentioned the concern, and the 4 sources that I've looked at also speaks about this: labor, editorial independence, and future of journalism. The ethical concern in this context is that AI automation raises concerns about job displacement and editorial control. The Namibian Code of Ethics and Conduct emphasizes editorial independence but doesn't consider machine delegation. Another thing coincidentally mentioned is by Peter Meaning is regional and African perspectives. And again, the ethical concern is that AI tools developed externally may misalign with Africa's media realities and landscape. Again, the topic then, how can Namibia assert normative leadership in shaping AI ethics for Africa's journalism? And lastly, in conclusion, said to myself, being academic, and this intervention taking place here, maybe one should also look at the roles of universities, journalism schools, and intermediary organizations such as the NMT. The ethical concern is that journalists often lack training in AI ethics and usage, especially in the global south. And whilst reading, I came across this quote. from one of the South African-based newsrooms. And I quote, universities, especially journalism schools, need to start integrating AI learning in their teaching much sooner. Most journalism graduates I see coming into our newsroom have little understanding unless they themselves are naturally inquisitive. So that's basically, in summary, the six kind of things that I've picked up from the sources that very much aligns with the stuff that Peter mentioned that came out from the report that was done. And basically, in a nutshell, our code of ethics is found wanting in that regard.
Can we expect an amendment soon?
Of course, my term of office is ending next month.
Yeah.
But I think the incoming media ombudsman has his or her work cut out. That one of the things that needs to be done is to follow the South African example, not so much amending the code, because the code serves, in my opinion, as a broad framework law in law that we say, that talks about all the things, but about the principles and the standard. But of course, the code cannot speak about all things. So the best way to go is to develop specific guidance note, like in the context of the South African Press Council. And I think one of the first things to develop for the new person coming in is to assist and to take the lead in developing a code, a guidance note on the use of AI in the newsroom. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Esther, you're now serving in the Namibian. You served also as assistant editor at the Windhoek Observer. How did you find journalists within your newsrooms use AI, and what sort of level of disclosure do they give you as an editor?
Yeah. First of all, when AI has been around for a while, but we have also picked up, I picked up a lot that a lot of journalists also don't really know what's going on. They really think it's just about ChatGPT. Few of them are probably using Grammarly or Gemini, and also few on Quillbot. But a lot of them don't know that there are other tools also within the AI space that they can utilize. Even the transcriptions, that was also a challenge. However, a few of them are now coming to terms with it. But I think the whole thing started off when AI came into place. There was fear that was instilled in journalists. Because I remember when ChatGPT was introduced in 2022 in November, we got links, like there is this tool that you can use, and we all look at it and we made fun of it first. Like, if you ask it, who is Esther, it will give you a description of what it thinks Esther Mbathera is. And we all stayed away from it initially, but then eventually especially because I then underwent the training where I realized that there is more to it than just asking it for questions and so on. But it was the fear that was instilled in journalists that actually kept a lot of them away. And on top of it, I also found out, especially with students, journalism students, they will tell you that because of plagiarism, they also fear to utilize the AI content, or to utilize AI to find answers to questions and so on. The very first one that I actually found out is even the Google Docs. A lot of journalists didn't even know that you can use it as when you are sharing your articles.
Yes.
They thought that you write your article in Google, in your Word doc, and then you share that Word doc. But Google Doc has been around for a very long time. It's just we were all scared of it because when I showed it to the first group, when I got to the Windhoek Observer, they were all fascinated by this whole thing that we can all, 5 of us can all be working on the same document. They were fascinated. And that was last year. It was not 10 years ago. It was last year. They were all looking at me like, so Esther, you can be at home and I just add your name and you'll be able to make changes and I'll be able to see those changes. So that's how everybody, a lot of people are fearful, and they were still asking me, if you are able to see my documents, will you be able to see my emails? That was the next question. Because now we are Googling and we are all it's Gmail to Gmail. So that was the fear that they had. Now, when it came to utilizing ChatGPT, because it was a tool that you can utilize, especially with big documents. Because, I mean, we don't have the time to read a whole document on a whole report. There are certain things that you look at, but the older generation will have already created their own tricks, their own AI in their minds as to when you're reading a report, what do you look out for? You go into your executive summary, you go to the recommendations, and you go to the conclusions, and then only will you then go up and check, okay, this was the recommendation, what was it based on, then you go up to the topic. But the younger generation, they really find it difficult because there is nobody that is putting them through that. The other thing is also, because this whole discussion about AI in the newsroom, apart from the ethics, it's just to first get the people to understand what it is all about and how they can really utilize it. And I'm glad that this workshop took place and a lot of journalists are here. It's just said that not many from the regions are here because what we are picking up as editors now is those that have started to experiment with AI. They now need to understand how to prompt and for what reasons you actually need to use AI, because you pick it up that a lot of them don't even, especially when it comes to speeches and media releases. You just find that the person just put the whole speech into ChatGPT and then they bring you a story. But now we pick up besides the language, it's a simple mistake where the whole story is way at the bottom. And when you ask the person, what is the story about? They will just tell you, it's an event that happened in Swakopmund. What is the event about? The minister was there. But what was the event about? Where was it? It was in Swakopmund. The minister was there. What did the minister say? I don't know. And you find also that it will be one-sided written. It will just be a one source. The moment you ask if it was an event, of course, the mayor would have been there, constituency councillor would probably have been there. If Rossing has handed over something, you can't just come back and say, the minister said Rossing did a very good job by handing over a classroom. Where's Rossing's voice? And that's the mistake that a lot of them are doing. But what we're also picking up is, especially on the social media content, there's 2 or 3 media houses where you really literally pick up that this content was probably person tried to write and then they put it into ChatGPT maybe or in Gemini to have it polished up, but they didn't read it themselves again to put context to it. So you find that you will have a lot of deep fakes also within the context that we are putting out on social media. But my only fear around AI at the moment is, as Peter has also explained, is currently it's American-based, a lot of it. And what will happen with the Trump administration, one never knows currently. So they can just do all sorts of things. I mean, they can take away Google. Google is for America. They can just take it away from us, as the way Meta is threatening the Nigerians. They can do that to the rest of the world. But they won't do it now because they are competing against the Chinese. But it's as Africans, there is a need for us to create our own machines. Yeah. And also that are country-based, because even if you create an African machine, it has to be country-based. South Africa is advancing on that stage already. They're working on some programs on it. Because also the issue of paying for these platforms, they also decide as to how you're paying. Because I don't know how many of you have subscribed to some of these AI tools. You will find it difficult to find the unsubscribe button. Yes. So that means that you get locked in by America. So the only other way to get out is to go change a bank account. Yeah, that's the craziest thing that's happening right now. You just wake up because if you have subscribed, I'm struggling with Google at the moment. I've got 2 Google subscriptions and I can't figure out which one is what. So it's that whole setup that I'm locked into that whole thing. And America is taking all our money. Yeah. So the other thing within the newsrooms is also journalists shying away to get out. We have now become desktop journalists. But my other thing is that if journalists are fearing that their jobs will be taken away, there is a bigger beast out there, which is your citizen journalist. They are out here because at the moment we trust the citizen journalists so much. When they share videos, we just trust this is the true reflection of what happened at the scene without getting the other version or without getting the prior version to what led to a fight in a community. So those guys are really pushing, especially on social media, and now with TikTok it's becoming worse. Yeah. And they are really pushing, and we are not going out there to go and verify facts. I can literally just go and pick up a group of kids and say, guys, stand here and pretend you are hungry. Let's get a few flies around. Let's take a picture, and then I can claim that we are hungry in Havana. Yeah. But if I go to Havana, you will not find that picture. So we need to also be wary of the citizen journalists. That is the other AI within our communities. Yeah, I'll end there.
Yeah, Esther, you highlight a lot of trust, the issue of trust within the tools, us being more African-based in our tools and less American-based. Like you said, it's real. The American or the geopolitics in the world right now is something really to consider when we use these platforms and how Africa goes forward in that approach. Tileni, from the union side, how have you seen the integration impact journalists and their daily work, or how the integration of AI in the daily works of journalists, and how it just impacts the training needs that they have?
Shaligan, let me start with, we are living in an era where we have all these tools, beautiful tools, or the early adapters are telling us that AI is the future. I have a friend who's not in the media, but they use AI for almost everything, and they are always arguing with him, but you are so anti-progress. Yet again, from a journalistic perspective, this is also the era where the journalism is at its lowest in Namibia. With all these tools, all these beautiful, wonderful tools that can enhance your ability to write a beautiful story, efficiencies, because AI then, instead of editing and working on a story, you can just put in this chatbot. And but if you follow, and I'm not speaking empirically, I'm speaking from just following on social media and what the comments are, journalism in Namibia at the moment is at its worst in maybe since independence. Now, I'm struggling to, what's the word that you guys use, juxtapose. You know, how is it that we have these tools and we are in the future, you know, we are headed to the future, but it's supposed to enhance our ability to be good journalists. But in actual fact, we are regressing. So that's the one question that I'm asking myself. How do we address this? The other point from with my head as a unionist and also my head as a lecturer here is that if you follow the discussion around robotics, which is AI, they've always, Africa, especially the African Union, we've always sort of frowned upon robotics. And one of it is exactly that we still have a labor force that needs to be developed. We are talking about fourth industrial revolution, yes, but Africa has not yet gone past the first industrial revolution. So at what point do we then bring our people into the labor force? Every day I sit and I train aspiring journalists. Where will they go work if their jobs are being taken away by machines? Those are the questions that I'm asking. How do I protect the beat reporters daily if their jobs are at stake? So, and then obviously we can now go back to the ethics around it and what impact will, and for me it's the quality, and I'm going back to the quality of journalism, because what I'm seeing here is that AI is stripping Namibia, especially Namibia, of its talent. And I was reflecting this morning, I was thinking about how do we look at this AI issue, and I'm saying, but World Press Freedom Day, let's merge these two together, you know. And Peter mentioned your ability to think and critically think. And we all say that freedom of expression, the root to freedom of expression is freedom of thought. You have to first think about things, you have to rationalize them, contextualize them, and then express them. Now, if what Esther is saying is true, that somebody goes to an event, takes the speech, puts it in a bot, it generates a story. They don't even think about what this does. And we come from a generation, when you walk into a newsroom and you come from a story and you are saying, well, the children in Havana are hungry. There were editors who would say, but okay, I want to close my eyes, but when you write the story, I want to see it, or I want to smell it. So all of that we are losing. Now, imagine a world without a Picasso, without Van Gogh. And I'm also asking about watching a lot of stand-up comedy. How will AI impact guys like Trevor Noah, Chris Rock, cartoons, all of this? And I'm talking now broader freedom of expression. All of this is impacted by AI. And sorry guys, journalism is a form of artistic expression. And your journalism is unique to you. And if you allow a machine to help you, you will lose that edge. And everywhere you go, every journalist is unique. They have their own signature. So why would you want to be like me? Because AI is copying. And because remember, generative AI takes things that are already in existence. They don't generate new stuff. So basically, you'll be taking Esther's work that she's been working hard for in the past, say, 15 years, and then you'll be claiming it's yours. Academically, guys like Chomsky have sort of fiercely accused something like ChatGPT and said that it's a plagiarism software. So, and I'm also asking about that, even in the workplace, whether it's in journalism or in academia. Do you cite ChatGPT? I mean, we for the past 20 years, we couldn't even cite Wikipedia. So do you cite ChatGPT? So we have our work cut out for us. But I would like to see more protection for the individual so that we can keep more people in the workplace.
The human element, that's what we're talking about. And Peter, during this week, emphasized that the critical thinking that you're talking about. The more you gain confidence within your AI platform and you see it as a human being or a more intelligent being as yourself, you lose your critical thinking because you rely more on it. And like you said, there's no copy and paste for another Esther. There's no copy and paste or Command C on your laptop for the work of Anne Marcus. As humans, we do add that little edge onto it, right? And working with social media, I'm sure you've seen a lot of AI-generated comments and sort of fake news or mis and disinformation floating around on the NBC's platform. How do you deal with that issue, and how have you incorporated these AI tools? I know you have a very interactive and a very busy TikTok account that not a lot of media houses have, but how do you balance it?
It's a good question. I think NBC is unique in the sense that we have a lot of different accounts on a lot of different platforms. Therefore, challenges are not always necessarily the same, especially when you look at AI and where it comes in. So at the moment, I think we have a lot of work that we're doing when it comes to trying to organize our social media platforms well. So each of our indigenous radio stations has a page, as well as national radio. Then obviously TV has a page, but we also have corporate pages for our PR efforts. Yeah. So first of all, we have the task of trying to really divide our information, divide our offering, to bring it to the people in a way that whoever they follow, whichever pages they follow, whichever programs they follow, that we give them exactly what they're asking for. So I think that's a challenge in itself, because we don't just do news. America, who's up there, is invested in a lot of news and current affairs. I work for the most part in programs. So in programs online, the kind of issues that we face is that, for instance, people, if we use AI tools, for instance, to flag certain words, that we consider to be problematic online, it rarely ever allows us to do the same, for instance, in indigenous languages. In English, it's fairly easy. You can flag certain words. You can make sure that we understand where problematic content comes in, whatever. That's fairly easy for us. But when it comes to indigenous languages, it's difficult. When it comes to people just building certain things, like, for instance, we have a fairly popular show, which I'm sure some of you may know, which is On the Street, which follows police officers around. All the beautiful AI tools don't help us when we, for instance, post a picture of an officer, of a woman who's in uniform, going to work on patrol, and we post a picture of her before we follow her on patrol. People start commenting on this thing, and someone will say, she looks fine, and someone else will say, especially the behind. And people start having the biggest, most sexualized, most problematic conversation about this picture. And because it's one bit after the other, AI is not going to help us to figure out which words we can flag and where we can do stuff, because it's us paying attention. Like, for now, there's nothing where AI can be super helpful with at this point in time. Another issue we often have is, for instance, with young people coming in, who we say, when it comes to programs, we give you programs and you can look at them and, for instance, post promos and stuff. They'll go to ChatGPT, and I'm not generalizing. We have a lot of very, very good people who come in, who are young, who are willing to do the most, who are very, very engaged, willing to learn, willing to do all kinds of things. But we also have those who come in and, for instance, for the same show, this is now an example I'm giving that didn't necessarily happen that way, but in a similar manner, perhaps. So we'll give them a promo for said show for On the Street. And in that particular episode, where we post now a teaser or a promo, we have two main cases that our crew has been following. One is on domestic violence, another is a murder in some area of the city. And someone will send you a text to be like, hey, just quickly check the caption for me. And it says, watch this thrilling episode, wonderful new developments coming to you on the street, don't miss out on this. But it's really, really sad and depressing content. And it's really something that, shows you that it's neither thrilling, nor is it exciting, nor is it any of these things. And so, in as much as I think it's great that we have AI tools at our disposal and that we can use them, really, especially people who come into the profession, so this is maybe adding to what you said, just to guide them in a way to say that whatever you're putting out there, try and have also, I think, among journalists, have intergenerational conversations. What can I bring to the table in terms of editorial guidelines, in terms of ethical understanding? And what can you bring to the table in terms of new apps, how you're using them? What's great in terms of even visual editing? Because I think for us, obviously, the visual element is also very interesting. And a lot of the software we use has AI aspects to it, which are great. But that these intergenerational conversations are happening when it comes to AI, that is happening is, I think, important, whether it's now for social media or it's for any other media outlet that tries to diversify in whatever way, can be done. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's why I encouraged all of the younger journalists and older or more seasoned journalists, please do get a number of someone you don't know in the industry. That intergenerational conversation, it doesn't just relate to AI, it relates to all experience, skills. We have a lot of our seasoned journalists leaving the industry now without carrying over that mantle, that tool. We have specialized court reporters who don't carry over that mantle. And we need that intergenerational conversations in the broader picture of journalism as a whole, as a fourth estate. But of course, with AI, and especially now that we have a deeper understanding of what it is, take it to the newsrooms. I know, especially after trainings, we tend to sort of keep it to ourselves. But go to your newsroom, go to your class, your first, second, or third year class, and have these discussions about AI. Because we often think about it and we keep it to ourselves. But the more we have a discussion about it, the better knowledge we get, and the more we share our knowledge with each other. We also, this week, very much highlighted on the policy question. Where are we in terms of policy? Do newsrooms have policy? And this is sort of the concluding question for our panelists. Where are your specific newsrooms in terms of policy? And I mean a proper policy, not a notification of a policy happening. But do you have policies? Do you have discussions with management about policies? Tileni, when we look at the union, has the union had discussions around AI policies within the executive committee of the union, and how you can better that for your members? Zoe, us as an advocacy organization, are we encouraging, are we bringing editors to the table with the Ombudsman, of course, to discuss these policy issues? And do we see editors being keen on it? I know we didn't have a lot of editors in this training, but I think that is definitely a follow-up conversation with editors to bring them to the table. I was having a discussion with Edward Mumbu earlier, where he said that he once took his own informational story he wrote. He put it into a platform where you can see whether it's AI generated. 70% of the content that he wrote was detected as AI generated, but it was his own work. Those conversations need to start happening. Zoe?
Sherikan, I think one of the biggest recommendations from the research is that there is need to develop newsroom-based policies. And as was indicated, a number of newsrooms are already in the process of doing that. But then it's not just about newsrooms. The NMT, as an institution, should have its own policy. I think any business in Namibia should have a policy, because AI is being used in all spheres of life, in all spheres of business. So we should all be developing those policies. In terms of intervention and support for the sector in general, I mean, John and I have been speaking about his parting gift when his term ends. And it was a discussion about the Namibian Code of Conduct. And aside from dealing with issues of just around AI-generated content, an important aspect is also user-generated content. And I think that was indicated earlier, because the code does not speak to that. But a last comment, and I'll keep it short, is when we, when we speak about newsroom policies, let us consider context, especially the Namibian context, but most importantly, learn from our peers. And when we, as Namibia as a country, we've just undergone the AI readiness review to see how ready Namibia is really to implement an AI policy. The Ministry of Education is spearheading the development of a national AI policy. And I mean, the Ministry of MICT has been speaking about AI for the longest time. We need to ensure then that our national policies are also cognizant of those, so that these things are streamlined and it speaks to the realities of all Namibians. So, I mean, there are existing processes, let's learn from there and just improve on those.
John?
Right. Namibia is a country based on the rule of law. And so obviously that emphasizes the notion that we must have rules in place. In preparation of this discussion, I came across the EU AI Act, in terms of which the EU is guiding those countries that are part of the EU to have very specific AI legislation in place. And I was very impressed by having such an approach, because yes, we can do all our little things. Like the newsroom must have guidelines, and the code needs to be amended and further improved. The Ministry of Education may come up with a policy, but ultimately, I think the best way to do is to have a piece of legislation that is of general application, from which all these guidelines and protocols and whatever we want to develop must step into, so that at the end of the day, we all speak to the same thing in terms of AI. And in conclusion, what I would say from my side, for too long, we are only talking to journalists, and we are complaining and lamenting about the fact that the newsroom has become juniorized, and we leave out of the loop the editors. So I think, as a follow-up for the organizers of this, let us have a discussion with editors, because they must also begin to see the importance of the intersection of AI and journalism, and so that they begin to understand the kind of issues that we all want them to understand. In conclusion, I would like to end with this, that when it comes to the use of AI and ethics, it is about taking a stand and being accountable ourselves.
Thank you, Esther.
Yeah, from my side, I just wanted to add on to the issue of the policy, because for me, it's the urgency of the policy. In Namibia, we have a tendency of saying many things, but we don't execute. We then have policies, and then we do not implement. But there is a need to start working on it and start running, because policies can always be a living document, and especially in the age of technology, it can never be stagnant. I mean, we are still discussing the cyber attack, cyber protection bill, when we have been attacked every day, and other countries are already at 15 years where they are constantly amending and making changes to theirs, and we haven't even started anywhere. So for me is that we need to start somewhere and then start working on it, as opposed to just having conversations around it. But the other issue for me is the journalists, especially the younger ones. After my brother here has spoken that he's training journalists, but he fears as to what happens to you guys after your training. For me, the one thing is I would like to advise you is that you are unfortunately in this space where a lot of noise is happening. You have social media, you will probably end up in hybrid newsrooms, because that's what's currently happening. If you are an NBC journalist, you are expected to go to a site and have a video, have a picture for the website when the story gets onto the website, and still have a short one for social media. So all of that is expected of you. It's unlike before. Our time, if I was print, I was print. And if I have a cameraman, even better. But you guys will have to deal with it differently. And then you also need to carve yourself out as to what type of journalism you want to do. Because with AI tools, they can help you with many things, but they cannot help you with your mind and also with your what matters to you most, or what you are interested in doing most. Because I've picked up, like Tileni is saying, that journalism is at the lowest at the moment. You find that half of us in this room are probably coming from Khomasdal, Katutura, and Rocky Crest, but we want to write articles for people of Klein Windhoek and Ouwersblik when we don't know their problems and forgetting that we have our own problems. And you'll see that in our current setups, you pick it up. Your own street will have dustbins for the whole week, but you will start seeing it as normal. But if you see dustbins in Klein Windhoek, you start questioning, this area is supposed to be clean. I'm going to ask the municipality, why is Klein Windhoek dustbins not emptied? So we need to go back to the basic, go back home. Ideally, if you can, leave parliament reporting and first go home and go report from home. And let AI assist your hometown first. Because I'm sure that especially those that might be practicing solution-based journalism, AI can help give solutions to your communities through your reporting as well.
Tsileni, from the union side?
So, very good question that we never actually reflected on how we can integrate the whole AI conversation into the working conditions of journalists. Eddie is here, Mr. Mumbu. I think we will have to really come up with a framework of sorts, because at the end of the day, AI does affect how journalists work, and we've been too focused on having a singular mind looking at working conditions and trying to keep journalists employed, whereas we're not realizing that there's this threat here, and obviously not to say that we are opposed to AI, but as to how can AI help and make sure that, one, quality of journalism grows, we keep more journalists in the job, and help us go with our freedom of expression and media in this country. My parting shots are not really related to AI. It's more of, since it's World Press Freedom Week still, Esther said that journalism is supposed to mirror the society that they come from. Those of us who are here, I'm still asking, is our work mirroring the Namibian society? Are we really? I feel that we are losing the way somewhere, and that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you for that reminder that we are so busy with World Press Freedom commemorations. Anne?
Maybe as a last comment on these things, while I think that a lot of things are changing in newsrooms, and that certainly there is a lot of need to look at, especially ethically, how things are progressing and in which direction we're headed, I think we must also remember that while things change, they also don't change at all. For instance, when it comes to people writing either news stories in print, or they're writing scripts for TV or for radio, the people who could write back in the day, they can still write even after the advent of artificial intelligence. And the ones who didn't, where our sub-editors spend a lot of time, for instance, sitting with scripts back then to try and make sense of it and to try and put it together, we spend equally as much time with those scripts now, trying to take out the AI element that is as obvious as it has been all along. So for subs, for instance, in newsrooms, I'd like to argue that while things change, they also really stay the same. The issues might change as such, but the time we spend on a story or on a script, the way we're trying to verify information, if you are not thorough in your work and you come back with information that is not accurate, it takes me just as long to sort of try and verify what's happening as it would if you get it from AI and I can't be sure if it's real or not. So oftentimes I think our frustrations must also be put into perspective. We will always have new challenges. We will always have new stuff that we are dealing with. And I think, like I said before, there's a bit of guidance that we can give to one another. I think we must not be too proud to try and figure out who else can help us figure out more about artificial intelligence and the human touch it needs in order for it to be put out there and be relevant, ethical, and just acceptable by our audiences. So if we can all work together from the different sort of, I think it's still listed there, from the different areas of our work that we come from. So if we can all come together and try and figure out how to best do this, I think it's not as bleak as we might think it should be or is meant to be, whatever. Yeah.
I almost wanted to sound political and say there's power in unity.
Exactly. That's what it is.
It's now time for our questions. Please lift your hand up, and short and concise, colleagues. Dwight, please. Yeah. Never short and concise. We can start with Dwight, yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Introduce yourself, please, where you're from.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, panel. I'm Dwight Links from Eagle FM. Once again, sorry, that's that I have to do this every day. Okay, I've got a bunch of questions. I don't know which one to zone on, but anyway, if we start off...
Two, thank you very much. 2 questions.
2 questions.
Thank you.
Okay. To the whole panel, specifically, because all of you have predominantly worked with the media. If we look at, because I also got part of this AI training, if we look at the AI training discussion, and Peter was one of the, tutors. Is this potentially where we've got to look at the industry of journalism, both as firstly what Tilene highlighted, that there's obviously entrenched intellectual property, because that is the foundational issue at heart, which is what Noam Chomsky highlighted, because it's intellectual property that this thing feeds off. The other particular aspect that Peter and the co-tutor had highlighted in the training that I got was that you've got to look at this as a process. Now, many people don't know that you're actually stepping into an industrial process. You're taking the raw materials and you're producing refined content at the end. Has there been an aspect in terms of the definition, the description of this industry, that this is potentially just refinement? Because in most cases, what Peter has highlighted to us, Peter, what was the guy from South Africa's name again? Paul. And Paul has also highlighted to us, because Paul said the biggest disruption has happened in South Africa. People were laid off. If we have to fear things, it's South Africa. Paul has highlighted that many people did not know of how they fit into information distribution. So is there not much, the ending question is technically, should we not look at the value of intellectual property, how you can still participate in the generation of it? And secondly, that the trainee journalists that you guys encounter have to look at this as a process, because this is a factory technically that you're working in. Yeah, thank you.
There we go. Otto?
Thank you very much. I probably will not sound as technical as Dwight, my friend here, but mine is not a question, rather a note, and it's directed to our seniors in the room, our editors. You can consider it a shade if you want, but what I'm saying is I feel the ideology of hybrid reporting is pushing a lot of journalists into a corner. And we are not addressing the elephant in the room, which is certain insecurities that people may have that lead to them not really having confidence in the product that they produce. And that is why, as a result, people want to meet deadlines and still want to sound correct, the overuse of artificial intelligence. So I would encourage you as senior journalists, as editors, please, if possible, and as much as time allows, unfortunately nowadays, editors and senior journalists are immersed with a lot of administration work and so forth. I would encourage you, take journalists by the hand if you have to. So that I believe that is one of the best ways to capacitate journalists to ensure that quality remains at the forefront of the products that they put out. Because if that's not the case, people will continue to overuse artificial intelligence. Obviously, artificial intelligence with its hallucination and all that stuff, biases and stuff. These are loopholes that we are overlooking, and I believe John briefly touched it, and Esther also spoke about it. So in as much as time and resources allow, please take us, the juniors, by your hand by the hand and help us also to be able to have that same understanding. I hope I'm not too off topic. Thank you.
No, I think what you're saying is very relevant, and it speaks to exactly what Tileni said. I think you would like to respond, and then I'll then hand Dwight's question to both the media ombudsman and Zoe. Just in a few words, please. We are running beautifully out of time.
So I'll respond to both actually in one.
Okay.
And it's because I think they speak to each other. If you go back to 2011, 2010, we were talking about mobile journalism. Exactly what you're saying, that you now have, you don't need a big camera, you don't need a big laptop, you don't need a big voice recorder, you need a cell phone, and you are good to go. So the convergence, media convergence in the newsroom, that has been a conversation coming. Now, the problem is that we were still struggling to verify, to fix that and to find ourselves in that space. How do we convert our newsrooms to converge? And then while we're trying to work that, then social media explodes, right? So now you're no longer producing content just for your newspaper or for your website, which requires video and audio and photography. Now you have across the board. And that's now Edward and I's challenge right now, how to protect you as a journalist in terms of your job. Are you overworked by what you said, being stretched? How does it affect the quality? And now, while we're still dealing with that, then comes AI. And Zoe will speak to this because a few years ago, before we started talking about content protection and the integrity of data and who owns this data, we're already having a fight with the big tech around content in terms of social media, citizen journalism, social media taking over the media space and sort of pushing traditional journalism to the brink of being obsolete. Now, Zoe will be able to go into how do we deal with that bridge and how do we counter that. So that's the problem that we're facing currently. Whose data is it? Is everything just working in favor of big tech, which is what happened with social media? We started losing out on content as well. I mean, ownership of content. I mean, when you are a newspaper, you write about something, tomorrow you find that it's all over the show and you can't derive income from it because big tech sort of looks at the numbers. And Facebook, Google, all of these guys, they take the numbers. So how do we do that? And that's the challenge that, Dwight, you're right. From a union perspective, we have to find a way to protect the journalists, to make sure that, one, their jobs are not threatened, and also now, how possible is it to ensure that one person can work across platforms? Is it humanly possible, or are we pushing the gray? So those are things that we'll have to work around them. We, unfortunately, in Namibia, we don't have much going for us in terms of policy, in terms of rules, and we are making them as we go. I think we are at the stage where if you're crossing a river at night and you keep feeling with your foot, is this deep or not? How can I go? So I think that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. Zoe?
Firstly, I just want to say I'm really, really happy that we are having these conversations because we don't speak to each other enough so that we can find common solutions because we are all facing these problems together. Dwight, you acknowledge that this is a process. We are working in the factory of information production. And if you are a journalist for the Namibian, you've ceded your copyright and your intellectual property to the Namibian. And that is the challenge that is there. I think the most important issue, and right now, there are big global challenges around intellectual property, copyright issues with big tech. But, it's the power balance who has the money, who has the data, and is in control of the data, and they are calling the shots. So, and in the bigger scheme of things, Namibia as a country is very insignificant, just in terms of numbers, and our government cannot challenge Meta. But as a continent, if we converge as the African Union, and also acknowledging that within the Africa Free Trade Agreement, we would become the biggest trade bloc globally. That is leverage, because big tech is only concerned about the bottom line. And then the other thing that we have to acknowledge, and Esther made this very clear. Right now, I'm a bit concerned because, who owns the data? It's largely Western companies, US-based companies. Our data is there. Trump can just shut it down overnight. And then where are we? But we must acknowledge that, and increasingly I'm using the word alternatives, because we do have alternative platforms, and we do have African platforms. We just don't know about it, we are not developing them, and we are not using them. So let us start there. And there was something else I wanted to say, but I lost my train of thought. Yes, Jonathan, you have put on the table the idea for us to have more conversations, to have those intergenerational conversations. So we are waiting for you to finalize that. And then hopefully, again, DW, the NMT, and hopefully the Commission, the EU delegation will also be part of facilitating. Sorry to put you on the spot, Ambassador, to facilitate those conversations. This was the final thing I remember now. We have to come to terms with the fact that journalism is not the same as it was like 30 years ago, and that gives you an idea of my age. About 30 years ago, when I was in the newsroom, journalism is dynamic. It evolves on a daily basis. We have to stay relevant. But what will always make us relevant is the human aspect. You've got your AI, you've got everything, but it must have human oversight. And what will always thrive is good journalism.
Thank you very much for highlighting that point there. I know there might be more questions, so I'm going to challenge you. After this, go speak to the people who you have questions for. Let's continue this discussion, Dwight. Let's continue this discussion after outside when we grab a bite to eat, just as we network and socialize and exchange those numbers. Zoe was very clear, the human oversight will always be there, and that's the necessary thing. We as humans will never be replaced. And I think that's one of our biggest fears, not just in the labor market, but just as a being, as our interactions have evolved. And journalism is dynamic, and it's almost like it's almost like a living body. It goes through changes consistently. But the more we shy away and the more scared we are, you'll be left behind. If you don't know how to operate your camera, your social media, you're going to be left behind. That's the mindset we must have. But everyone, thank you so much for the participants, for everyone who joined this conversation. Thank you so much for coming. We appreciate you. I am very sure this will not be the last. We must have more trainings, more conversations on how to better journalism. Thank you to our partners, the EU, DW, and NAST as well. We appreciate you so much for making this possible. And hopefully, as we said, we'll have more of these conversations. I really want journalists, and I want to train journalists more. I've said to Zoe that I have a few trainings in my mind, because I've been there. I was I am in the space, and I want to see us a bit more knowledgeable and to be able to understand the world that we work in the world outside. But yes, thank you so much. You're going to take a group photo right here, so please don't leave. From me, Shaligan, it is a goodbye.